Thank you so much, and thank you, Deshni, for such a wonderful panel discussion. We really learned a lot today. I'm an expert of sustainability issues going forward. Thank you so much, and now we're going to turn our agenda to section 7 as I welcome Ms. Munyai, Chipwa Munyai from the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. Chipiwa is a Deputy Director for Biodiversity and Climate Change. She holds a master's degree in botany. She's also a secondary national focal point for the EPES. And Ms. Munyai, since the inception of the NCA work in South Africa, she has been so central, also forming part of the NCA coordination unit. Over to you, Ms. Munyai, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Ntakazeni, for such a grand welcome. So, as Ntakazeni indicated, I am Chipwa Munyai from the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and I'm the chair for this session, which is session 7. And I think she also indicated that, some of us will be traveling to Venda today, so we are not going to waste much time, so we are going to be very quick. I think based on yesterday's discussions and even from our panelists today, I think we have heard a lot on the role of NCA in terms of supporting private and public sector to understand the interaction between biodiversity, society and the economy. So during this session, we are going to be focusing on some of the natural capital tools for the private sector. So for our session, we have got 5 speakers, which are as follows. We are going to have a presentation from Ms. Candice Dot, who is the Director Global Market Engagement from the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. We will also have a presentation from Mr. Thomas van Vichen, who is the Director from Earth Inc. And then we will also have a presentation from Dr. Gaby Terren, who is a Program Manager for National Biodiversity and Business Network. And this presentation will also be done by Luvuyo Kani, who is our GIS specialist from Endangered Wildlife Trust. And lastly, we will have a presentation from Prof. Martine Visser, who is the Professor for Environmental Policy Research Unit from the School of Economics, University of Cape Town. So without wasting much time, I am going to call Ms. Candice Dot, who will be presenting on, she will be introducing the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures Recommendation, Action-Orientated Insights. And maybe just to also indicate that after her presentation, we are not going to take questions. We will wait for Thomas to present first, as their presentations are more a bit similar. So then we will take questions after. Candice, you have got the floor. Thanks.
Morning, everyone, and I certainly don't want to get in the way of the vendor weekend away. If there's any space in the car, please. I'm a willing traveller. So, as introduced, I lead on our global market engagement within the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here today and just talk through a little bit of the history within which the TNFD has come about. Just a short history here, but you can see a number of things took place prior to our very exciting launch of the final TNFD recommendations in September of last year. So just to be very clear, this is September last year, so it's still relatively new. And I think sort of testament to the fact that a number of people I've met over the last 2 days, when I say I work for the TNFD, I certainly feel like I hope this presentation helps outline a little bit more detail about what exactly it is that the recommendations help support, and very complimented by the panel earlier. I think it's important to highlight from the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure that it's a global market-led, science-based, and government-supported global initiative. and also helpfully to outline the fact that it was immersed in the fact that it needs to be financially and impactfully usable. The fact that the information within this is also very highly integrated into the work that has been done on climate really, I think, is important to highlight. So a quick overview of our mission, and just highlighting that the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure has developed a set of disclosure recommendations and guidance that encourage and enable business and finance to assess, report, and act on their nature-related dependencies, impacts, risks, and opportunities. Our aim is to help support the shift in global financial flows away from nature-negative outcomes and towards nature-positive outcomes, and is aligned with the Global Biodiversity Framework. As I've already highlighted, we're market-led. We have 40 task force members. One of the task force members is actually a South African-based organization, so FNB, and you can see the list of the financial institutions on the right there. Science-based organizations have been critical and integral, I think, in the formation and feedback that has gone into the recommendations and our sector guidance and additional guidance that is available on our website, as well as the work that we do with government departments, policy departments, regulators, and standard setters globally. And you can also see that the inclusion of the real economy is really important, and the number of organizations in that list also represent having a footprint in South Africa, but largely, obviously, a massive global footprint across a number of different sectors. I'd like to highlight and just bake this in the fact that I'm hoping a number of you in the audience have worked with or have had some appreciation for the work that's gone into the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, and just highlighting that a lot of our work and support within the NFD recommendations has been very deliberately baked in using the same language, similar structure, and similar approach that was used for the TCFD. The 11 disclosures have been carried across from the TCFD. Just to be clear, we have 14 recommended disclosures within the TNFD. As I've already implied, it's very consistent language and also language used within some of the global standard recommendation or policy recommendations. Much like the TCFD, the TNFD is a voluntary market-led framework. And I just want to highlight those 3 additional recommended disclosures that integrate the importance of engagement with Indigenous peoples, local communities, and affected stakeholders, as well as sensitive locations and value chains. For those of you that are interested in being able to find a little bit more detail, I think it's helpful to send you to our website where really from a signposted perspective, we integrate a number of our technical papers, starting with the TNFD recommendations at the top, but we've also got a considerable amount of additional guidance and material that supports work that we've done around sector guidance, metrics and measurements, as well as biome guidance, target setting initiatives, and also working through some new guidance linked to transition work. Oops, I went right to the end, guys. The power of hitting one button that can take you right to the end and the fast track to vendor. So, I think it's also helpful that a number of the stakeholders that we are engaging with have really made it very, very clear that we need to provide more evidence bases. A lot of case studies and more examples, real-world examples, are critical to help support capacity building. So I just wanted to highlight the fact that in the middle there, and it's such a wonderful title, but it was work that was done in December last year that was published by the Bloomberg New Energy Finance team. It's also available, it's 10 case studies on our website. And it really covers a number of global industries, highlighting real-world examples with over $80 billion of losses on the risk side, where companies fail to realize that they've got massive dependencies on ecosystem services, such as water, pollution services, fertile earth, and clean air. I think our previous panel also emphasized the importance of central banks and different prudential authorities and other policymakers, and think it's helpful to highlight that I'm aware of over 8 central banks that have been doing detailed risk analysis work. They include Brazil, Mexico, France, Netherlands, Australia, and the Bank of England. And I also know Hungary's been doing some detailed work. And Dorothy highlighted some stress testing work that's been done across the continent as well. And I think, again, to emphasize the fact that in some of that work, it's been quite insightful to understand the fact that there's at least a third to 50% of banking portfolios that are at high risk to nature depletion. We're certainly seeing a number of companies, both banks and insurance and investment managers, already getting their heads around nature. You could hear that from the previous panel, and certainly some feedback from Johan from Nedbank. And taking an integrated approach into realizing that climate is just part of the natural system, and that this is an important area for them to do additional work and additional disclosure analysis in. In addition to this, I think a really critical stakeholder is the role of pension funds, asset owners, and insurance companies. So from an investment perspective, you're certainly seeing, and I'm sorry this is in font size 2.5, but I think it's helpful to see from a logo perspective, just some of the organizations that are being very deliberate publicly about requesting a lot more information with regard to nature-related information. So seeing who's asking those questions, and also understanding that those questions are being very deliberately targeted towards information around nature capital disclosure to help assess risk oversight, and to also understand how nature-related impacts and dependencies are considered within a company's strategy, and also understanding those material risks and how those material risks and opportunities are being managed by organizations. You're going to hear a little bit more detail just now from Thomas, but also looking at the TNFD's LEAP approach, which focuses on locate the interface with nature, evaluate dependencies and impacts, assess risks and opportunities, and then prepare to respond and report, and looking at how that the LEAP approach is helping scope, locate, and evaluate and assess disclosures of material nature capital risks and opportunities, both within the context of corporate governance, but also strategy, risk management, and metrics and target setting. And one of the things that I'm finding so insightful with the different organizations that I have personal conversations with from a bilateral perspective is just the sheer size of the different groups within organizations getting involved. This used to be something that you would tend to speak to just a sustainability team about. It's now really critical to be working with financial departments, risk departments, and certainly the duties of board directors, to be quite frank. This topic of climate and nature comes up all the time, and I think the previous panel also referenced this. It is unfortunate, but it is our reality, and our reality is a lot of work started at least 10 years ago with the COP21 in 2015, where you obviously saw the Paris Agreement coming together, but I think it's important to look at how climate and nature are converging. And we're seeing it through an evidence basis. On our website, you can actually see a number of organizations already with publicly TNFD-aligned reporting. And you can see how companies are actually using TCFD and TNFD reporting and helping integrate those two when they are doing their public reporting. So this is a topic that I'm just going to ask you all to put your seatbelts on for that trip, because this is not for everyone, okay? It's that dreaded looking at frameworks, looking at policies, looking at regulation, and looking at the different alphabet soup, I think people refer to it as. But I just want to make a little bit more sense out of this, because I think it is really important to understand the interoperability and consistency between regulatory frameworks and standards frameworks. So I am not able to have a conversation right now with any stakeholder group that has anything to do with Europe right now that does not ask us information or is not busy working on their CSRD reporting, just to be clear. So the number of organizations and the reporting teams that are currently occupied with the amounts of work that is going into being ready to report on the CSRD is really important. So the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, which is EU specific and applicable to companies subject to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which applies a double materiality approach, is a mandatory regulation now. I think it's important to understand that we have recently published, very deliberately, a joint correspondence mapping table, which is available also on our website, between EFRAG and the TNFD. And it also helps with a detailed mapping of the disclosures and core metrics recommended by the TNFD and those that are required under ESRS. Companies are telling us that they are able to review aspects of their nature risks and opportunities whilst preparing for their CSRD reporting as well as their TCFD reporting using this mapping table. I also want to highlight that within the LEAP approach, the ESRS also states that companies may use the LEAP approach to conduct their materiality assessments on the sustainability matters. So I think it's helpful that there's a lot of cross-referencing between a number of the standards. You heard Dorothy mention earlier that the ISSB is also has publicly announced in April that they're going to be committed to work on new research. Again, a beautifully worded piece of research, and that's been integrated into their work plan. They refer to exploring information about sustainability-related risks and opportunities associated with biodiversity, ecosystems, and ecosystem services, which they refer to as the Bs. We refer to that as nature-related issues, but just to be clear, I think it's important that they've mentioned the fact that this research project for the next 2 years will be drawing on the work of the TNFD, the GRI, EFRAG, and others, as well as also potentially enhancing the SASB standards. Also noting for the audience that the IFRS sustainability standards has already embedded the TCFD recommendations into their S2 standards, and resulting in the sunsetting of the TCFD. So a number of organizations have been in multiple years of reporting on TCFD that is now being integrated into their S2 reporting going forward. And last but not least, referencing the Global Reporting Initiative, which is also widely regarded globally. It's a standard that exclusively focuses on impact reporting and impact materiality. And just last week, we were able to launch a TNFD interoperability mapping disclosure between the TNFD recommendations and the GRI. So all of that is available on our website. And my favorite slide, because I personally am involved in this work, is our adoption numbers. So in June, during London Climate Action Week, we were able to communicate from our initial launch in January. During Davos, we announced that we had 320 global early adopters. We now have over 416 global adopters. That represents over 51 jurisdictions, 62 global sectors, about 114 financial institutions, and that attributes to about a $15.9 trillion of assets under management, and also includes about 25% of the world's systemically important banks. We continue to draw on the fact that we are actively calling for organizations across various stakeholder groups to adopt the TNFD recommendations. You're able to adopt via our website, and we will be making our next announcement of adopters during COP16. What does it actually mean to be a TNFD adopter, you might be asking? Well, there's no perfect runway to answer that question. I think every organization is different, and it is therefore really about an adoption pathway and also working on a multiple year capacity building program in some cases. I think it's also helpful to encourage organizations that when we talk about adoption, we are referring to getting started. So when organizations actually started with their TCFD reporting, some organizations only met somewhere between, on average, 1 to 2 of the recommendations within the first year of TCFD reporting. And that's 1 or 2 of the 11 TCFD recommendations. We're applying exactly that same methodology within becoming a TNFD adopter. I just wanted to highlight a couple of pieces of work that are our focus areas for the moment. I've touched on our global engagement. I'm also actively involved in capacity building, working with a number of delivery partners with regard to training and capacity work. I think that's come up a number of times throughout the last 2 days. It's really important that continued work goes into building the skills needed, and certainly a better understanding of what is available to accomplish some of the things that are being asked of a number of organizations. We've also got additional sector guidance that is being worked on, and as I've previously mentioned, some work on value chains. And an area I'm particularly excited in is taking what was done in the climate transition space and looking at what that looks like from a nature transition perspective. And then we will be launching a blueprint for our Global Nature Public Data Facility during COP. We have two avenues. Yassine, who was speaking on the panel earlier, I just want to highlight our consultation group in South Africa. So that is something that is being set up right now. I think it's really important to understand that between BASA and NBI, that consultation group convening is actually about them working with industry partners and different stakeholders. But anyone is able to connect within the consultation group itself and connect with Yassine or Garth, specifically with regard to helping get some of that support, but looking at also some of the channels within which the consultation group will be helping support the capacity building around TNFD, as well as our own forum. So this forum is more from a global perspective. It's helpful for stakeholders to keep informed from a regulatory perspective, a standards perspective, some of the global trends, and being able to join this forum is free to join. It's a network. We run a series of webinars and various engagements, which are very practitioner-led. I'm busy working on our series of next webinars. But just to give you a taster of some of the webinars we've recently hosted, we've had some with regard to insights from corporate reporting, what the journey was that those corporates have gone on to be able to even be a TNFD adopter, what it looks like from an internal stakeholder perspective, how they were able to get buy-in from various stakeholders. Equally, the asset management industry, who are both report preparers and report users. And then we've also done some work on some of the policy work I've referred to around CSRD and speaking to organizations that are already within the context of doing reporting and how some of the work within the TNFD recommendations is helping them. Those are all available to watch on demand on our website. And then just to close, I think we have heard data. If I could do a mental word cloud, I think data has come up many times. And our co-chair, David Craig, actually had this cartoon created recently, which I think is a pretty powerful picture. But it really highlights the fact that I think throughout the last 2 days, I've learned more about some of the data capabilities and what's actually available to be used and the power of what we have available. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying we've answered all the questions, but I think it's about being curious and remaining aware of what the options are around and the fact that everyone in this room is willing to share. I have yet to meet anyone in the space that I've been working in for the last 6 months not willing to want to share, and that goes across sector. I mean, there are very few, and I come from a financial background, but you know, competitive advantage is something people normally hold on to, and when you speak to companies in different sectors, often they don't want to talk to each other. This is one area I'm seeing companies are willing to talk to each other about. They are learning, and there are financial institutions learning together, and I think there are amazing initiatives. Thank you, Amy, for the invite and all the work that Sambi and Stats SA and all the other stakeholders are doing. I think on behalf of just the work that we're trying to do, I think we're one of the puzzle pieces. And it's a puzzle piece that I think is an important infrastructural bridge. And hopefully I've been able to help explain where the TNFD fits in. So thank you. Over to Thomas.
Thank you very much, Candice, for your presentation. As I indicated, we are not going to take questions now. We will wait for Thomas' presentation. Thomas, you've got the floor.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and yes, Candice and I are the TNFD tag team. So we're going to look a bit at some contextualization around nature-related risks, and this is actually where we're going to go down the rabbit hole slightly, because there's going to be a lot of detail, and actually we should have had Martine Visser up after me, and it would have been already a proper tag team. So as you'll see, a lot that's coming out of the presentation is going to be interluding